Hello, you lot, and welcome to a special episode of It Can't Just Be Me. Now, it's that time of year when we look back and take stock of everything we've achieved in 2023. And you know what? We wanted to do the same. We are so proud to have launched It Can't Just Be Me earlier this year. And over the course of 26 episodes, we've welcomed some extraordinary guests and experts into our studio who've shared not only their personal stories, but also been there to hear yours. So here are some of our favourite bits from the series so far. But we also want to hear what your thoughts are. So as always, but we also want to hear what your favourite bits are. So as always, please do get in touch and let us know. And in the meantime, enjoy.
Hi Anna. It can't just be me who is really struggling with sharing my daughter following the breakdown of mine and her father's relationship. We actually separated when she was 3. She is now 12, and it's only really recently that I have begun to really struggle with feelings and questions around what is my actual purpose. I sometimes don't even feel like a mum, never mind a part-time one. My daughter lives with me full-time and visits her dad every other weekend. However, she does so many extracurricular activities, I hardly see her. I am basically feeling like her taxi and financial provider, and that's about it. When she is at home, she's either in her room, on her phone, or, chatting with her friends, and I can't force her to spend time with me. I feel like I should be doing more and doing better, but she is happy, and I don't want to stop her from doing the things that she loves for me to become the bad guy. What can I do?
Oh, this sort of breaks my heart. I mean, Lala, you used to work with children and families as a social worker. So this is an area that you've got a huge amount of expertise in. When you were listening to that, what was your immediate response?
Oh no, forget my social work. This is literally my life.
Yeah.
I have a 12-year-old son. I have him for 2 weeks straight, and then he goes to his dad's every other weekend. And he's about to go into year 2 of high school, year 8, whatever we call it. And I'm in exactly the same position. He's absolutely obsessed with fishing. All he wants to do is wake up in the morning, take his fishing rods, go to the lake, comes back at lunchtime for a couple of sandwiches, then goes back off again, and then wants me to come pick him up in the evenings. And I'm often like, well, wouldn't you like to just go to the cinema today or go bowling? He's like, no, fuck off, Mum. I mean, he doesn't say that, but I'm sure he would if he could, because he's just got absolutely zero interest in being around me. In fact, I'm just holding him back, I think, in life. I am just there to be a maid, provide him with lodgings and food and drive him around. And I understand what she's saying, because it's a drastic change. You most of your child's life you spend with them clinging on to you. They want nothing more than to be around you. And actually there can be times, when he was 5, 6, by the end of the 6 weeks holidays, I'd be like, I'm about to have a fucking nervous breakdown, get this kid away from me. And now it's the complete opposite. It can feel like, what the fuck's happened? Like, why doesn't my kid want to cling to me in the same way? But actually, it's normal. It's because what I would love to say to her is actually this shows that you have done your job so well, because really, ultimately, your job is to create a person who can thrive and survive in the world without you. You need to create a little independent human, and you've done it. I think actually you need to now go and find some shit to do when you're not with her.
Are you now you're thinking, oh, hang on a minute, perhaps I'm starting to eke into perimenopause now?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm very, very aware of mental health symptoms and sort of mental illness. And I've always been very open about the fact that I suffer with anxiety, and I've taken medication over the years for anxiety to deal with that. It's very, very hard to separate that now in my mid to late 40s, that sort of anxiety and what's going on there with actually, is this to do with the perimenopause? It's impossible for people to work that out. And it ends up being down to you thinking, is this me and how I've always been? And why is it worse now?
Do you know what else, though, I think, when you say it's down to us? I think it's really helpful if you've got people in your life, whether it's your partner, your children, you might be your mum, what kind of relationships you have around you, to have open and honest conversations with people. Because when I told my kids and husband what was happening, I could almost see, like, they literally were like, hallelujah, because they'd obviously all noticed this change in me and were kind of, I think, slightly nervous to broach anything, or I remember there was this one morning where it was a Sunday morning and I was particularly disappointed with the fact that nobody had cleared up after breakfast on a Sunday morning.
I'd be livid.
And the pots were everywhere. I came into the kitchen and I just went mad. And I sat at the table and I told them all that I'd been looking at flats in Beaconsfield. I hadn't. And I was thinking of, going off until they could all sort themselves. I mean, I was literally planning this escape where I was going to leave them all. Nobody was more surprised than Kenny. And I think back now, my daughter always pretends that she's traumatised by it. And she goes, oh, I was just so distraught. And she had tears kind of like falling down. Of course, none of them had done anything particularly unusually bad. But I was obviously just feeling like, I just can't cope with you all right now, And then I had Penny Lancaster on my podcast, The Midpoint, and she talked about throwing a chicken dinner on the wall, Rod Stewart's chicken dinner at the wall. and she said Rod took the boys out the kitchen and then came back and sat down with her. And I love Rod Stewart for this because, he's had some practice. I think there were 5 wives before, but he sat down with her and just talked about kind of how she was feeling. And then she went off and spoke to a doctor and found out that these were perimenopausal symptoms.
Well, we know that divorce rate actually increases for couples when women are going through their perimenopausal years. So, yeah, communication is essential, isn't it? To say, do you know what, I'm feeling really crap. And then your other half
goes, yes.
And yes, you are. So it is about communication. But I'm just picking up on your anxiety, Ellie, because again, for me, the mental health symptoms were just appalling. And I ended up going to see the only gynecologist, psychiatrist in the country.
Wow.
But I went to go and see him and I was saying, I feel really, really shitty. And we discussed about taking HRT and estrogen. And I remember him saying to me very clearly, have you ever taken antidepressants before in your life? I said, yeah, I have. Through other periods in my life, periods where I've been struggling with fertility, for example. I had an ectopic pregnancy. So after that, I was really very unwell mentally. And he said, did antidepressants help you then? And I went, yeah, they did. So he said, so why don't you just take them now? Because they can help you. And it did. It did.
I think that we owe it to ourselves and we owe it to all women to have that pragmatism, that an antidepressant is going to help you. That's an absolutely brilliant thing to pick up on. Other times in your sort of reproductive life, if we want to call it that, after something as sort of traumatic as an ectopic pregnancy, when hormones were all over the place and the physicality of that and the emotional side of that, you found antidepressants helpful. So that's really good to then sort of mirror that through the menopause and think, well, actually, maybe even though this is hormonal, maybe also an antidepressant is going to help you now.
Might help.
Yeah.
As a doctor, sorry, I'm taking you're here as a doctor, so I'm going to use you.
Brilliant.
Hey, Anna. I'm a female entrepreneur in my mid-30s and I have 2 young children aged 3 as well as a 10-week-old. I'm struggling, to be honest, with the mental load of managing all of these different areas of my life. My professional and my personal lives are pretty full on. And I don't feel that this is split equally in my relationship. My partner is incredibly present and a very equal partner in many ways, but the mental load of ours and our children's lives does fall disproportionately onto me. And I feel really frustrated because this feels like a cliche that I've always been keen to avoid in my life. And when I speak to friends in similar situations, in similar life stages, I'm definitely not the only one who's experiencing this. As a case in point, no one's interviewing men, asking them how they juggle fatherhood and working lives. And yet this is a question that I'm asking, and that's also frequently asked of working women. So big question, but what should I do? How should I cope and redress the balance? And also more widely, what can we do to change things in society? Because it feels that this is something that affects lots and lots of people.
Okay, so before we get going, Rose only gave birth 10 weeks ago, so she's coping with a lot right now. And she's definitely not alone, because according to stats from gov.uk, in 2022, nearly 75% of mothers with children under 15 were in work. So there are a lot of women experiencing the same thing right now, including you, Sophia. How much can you identify with Rose's situation?
I definitely can identify with being an entrepreneur and then having small kids. When I had my first daughter, I was in my late 20s and the business was maybe a year old. So it was still a startup. It was in its infancy and was growing. But I think my situation was a little bit different because
I didn't have 2 kids at the time, and I was completely naive about what having a baby, the difference and the changes they would mean.
Fill us in, because for those listeners that don't have children, I don't have children.
Yeah.
I've seen it, obviously,
Yeah.
with my friends, but I can't imagine the disruption. So what is it like when you're trying to run a business and then you've got a new baby?
Yeah.
What happens?
Every day was very busy. There was a lot of responsibilities because when you're an entrepreneur, it's like the buck always stops with you. And when you're a small team, young team, we were all very young, you have to kind of have eyes on everything. So yeah, I was pregnant and then I had my daughter and I stayed at home for it was probably about 10 days. That was the choice that I made because I felt like I'd abandoned my other baby, which was the business in a way. And I think we got on the tube one day and I went to Westfield and got like a really good baby carrier. And then I just had it in the office with me. I'm not saying that's the ideal for everybody, but for me right then and for me sort of mentally and also where the business was, that was the best thing for me to do.
When did you realise that your sexuality was fluid?
I was really, really, really young. I feel like I was about 9 years old. 9 years old when I started maybe kissing my friends.
Yeah.
And just being let's practice for the boys.
Yeah.
And they would be so excited to practice for the boys. And in my head, I was I'm not practicing for the boys. I actually quite like this. I like this with you. Also, I went to an all-girls school and I was just oh my God, amazing women. I don't have to deal with men. But it was very, very difficult actually because there was a couple of situations in school where I had interactions with certain friends and then they would deny it and then that would make me feel
oh, the shame.
Oh my God, there's shame that's attached to this. Am I not enough for them? And obviously I had so many I had daddy issues and issues when it came to men from a very, very young age that I've only discovered in my adult life, obviously. There was a lot of feeling like I wasn't enough. And then I went ahead and I told everyone in school that me and this girl done this thing. Obviously now looking back, I was why the hell did you do that? But I was young and I wanted to feel claimed by her kind of thing. So from there, I was a bit oh gosh, maybe let me just keep this stuff low key and not tell anyone really about it.
Because you were getting the reactions of, hang on a minute, being with a woman, being with a girl, being gay is not a good thing.
And then thinking about coming out to other friends and family and stuff like that, I just wasn't ready. And then I met my daughter's dad when I was 16. And then we were obviously together just under 10 years and had Catalea. And then I've always known I've been attracted to women. I've had loads of experience with women and I've just always thought that I feel safer with a woman. I feel like me and women, that just feels like my equal, right?
But is that because obviously your gender, your sex is that you are female? So is it to do with that you just understand the gender? Do you know what I mean?
I love boobs. I'm really attracted to boobs. No, but I hear exactly where you're coming from. But no, there's this kind of emotional connection that I feel with a woman. It's just completely different to any kind of relationship that I've been with a man. And I've really sat down and been in therapy and discovered the reasons why I have been with men and stuff like that. So, that's really, really helpful for me to look back and understand now. But that's not me saying that, God forbid, if anything happens between me and my partner, that I wouldn't ever go on a date with a man and stuff. I mean, I don't see it happening, but I'm not somebody that's I would never.
I started to freak out because I'm beginning to figure out who and what I am and what I desire. I don't like it because society at large maybe is telling me that this is wrong. And because of my dad's background and stories I'd heard in the press, things like honour killings were very much in my mind.
God, that must have been terrifying.
I have this gorgeous, warm, amazing, sensitive Iraqi father who is my best friend. I go fishing with him every weekend. We're mad about the natural world. We laugh at the same things. And I am for him, as a refugee, I am for him his greatest achievement. And now I am going to have to tell him that I am this sick, disgusting, flawed thing, gay. Mm-hmm. I know he's going to think it's his fault. How can I do that to him? How can I break this man's heart? While I'm still feeling shame about what I am. So I held it in for years and years. It totally destroyed my secondary education. Couldn't focus. Major anxiety. Dealing with it on my own. Became an introvert. became a really shit son and shit friend.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. I lost the essence of who I was. I was a shell of a person. It was still Riyadh, and little flickers of Riyadh would come through. But for the most part, I kept myself to myself. I even had a friend come up to me once when we were walking from school to the bus stop, and he said, well, you're always looking down. Why are you looking down? Is it because you're sad or because you like nature and you're looking at the leaves? And that always stuck with me. And I'm actually getting emotional talking about it now. And I said, I'm looking at the leaves because I like the leaves, because I had shame about the shame and that I had given it away. I thought I had it down, the act.
That
I'm
you
fine.
had it hidden. What can I just ask what your parents were doing in the middle? Because they must have seen their son looking down at the leaves, becoming more and more withdrawn. Did they think this is just a teenage phase?
Yeah.
Or did they realise that maybe he's hiding something?
I think I was actually the best at keeping it from them. And what helped was that they knew what actually made me happy. It's so weird that you're scared of them, but also their company for me was paramount because they were my best friends. I grew up in quite a rough council estate, and because of my inherent femininity, that was attacked. And so I was kept inside and they became my friends, my best friends. And so They just thought when I was acting out, it was just hormones, you know. That's just how teenagers are. It came to a head when my mother found porn on the family computer. How stupid was I?
Oh my God.
And let me tell you, what she found was so adorable in hindsight. I'm not Googling this stuff now. It was hot hunk topless.
Oh, really?
Jock big muscles. I'm basically looking for what I could see on the Calvin Klein boxes in the supermarket. Do you know what I mean?
And how old were you, would you say?
15, 16.
Okay. So your mum then
She
got the
approached
clue.
me and she was like, do you have anything you want to tell me? I'm like, no. What? Are you sure? You know, you can tell me anything and I'll always love you. And I was like, oh God.
Oh no.
It's that. And I knew it was the computer. I just knew. So anyway, an hour had passed of me with my head in my hands, just answering with grunts like, are you this? No. Are you that? And then she said, are you gay? I was like, no, I think I'm bi. Tears, hugs, everything be okay. She took the day off work. I took the day off school the next day. She took me to the Japanese gardens of all place, How Camp, and we talked it out. But the agreement was made there and then that Dad would be kept out of this secret.
Because she knew and you knew how he would react.
It actually wasn't that we knew, it was that we didn't know.
Oh.
And we were afraid of what we didn't know. We kept it in for about 9 months. And in that time, my acting out as a bad teenager became worse. Because I preempted that this man who I loved was on the cusp of being a horrible, horrible person to me, because if he was about to find out what I really was. So if I could get ahead of it and pre-hate him,
oh God,
then I will be protecting my emotions when he does find out, because I won't be sad because I hate him already.
Wow.
When he disowns me, I've beat you to the punch, so fuck off.
Yeah.
I don't need you, Dad. Which is such a horrible thing to go through. And I never spoke about that to my mum. I just sort of did it subconsciously.
Yeah.
And he couldn't understand. And our relationship broke down. And it was really, we no longer went fishing. We no longer spoke really. It was just horrible. And my mom had reached breaking point because she was holding this secret between herself and her husband, the two men that she loved most in the world. And then she said, I think it's time to tell your dad. And I'm looking at her going, shut up. And he goes, tell me what? I was like, nothing. And then I tried to say the words and I was totally paralysed. Physically, my mouth wouldn't say I'm gay because I still had shame and fear. And I had a school book on the countertop and I pulled it over to me. I ripped the back page out of it and I wrote, I'm gay on it. And then I slid that little scrap over to him and he looked at it and time stood still. I knew my life had changed forever.
From that second.
In that moment. And I couldn't take it back. And so he looked at it. It must have been only about 10 seconds. He came over and hugged me and he said, it's okay. I love you. We're going to be okay. We'll fix this.
We'll fix this.
That's the thing. I was like, that doesn't really fit what I was thinking I might hear. You didn't need to add that bit. It was a week later that he had completely stopped talking to me, couldn't make eye contact with me. He became this ghost of a man, and he would just go to work and just sit there all day. And then my mum said, go out to the garden, bring him a beer and have a chat to him. And I was terrified again, but I had this newfound kind of righteousness. I had done the hard work. I was actually feeling quite good because now I had no secret.
Yeah. So you didn't burden yourself, but then in a sense burdened your father.
Yeah. So I went out to him and I spoke to him and I probably said what I shouldn't have said. I tried to accelerate the acceptance process by just handing it to him. I wasn't as gentle as I could have been. I was like, look, this is who I am. One day I'm going to bring a guy back here home and I want you to embrace him and love him as I love him, and I'm going to marry him and he'll be part of the family, and that's that. And then he completely physically broke down to his knees, crying, wailing like someone had died. Me. Hypothetically, his son. And then we found out years later that the night that he first found out with the note, he had contemplated taking his own life. And he went downstairs looking for pills. He changed his mind and it didn't happen, thank God.
Oh my God, really?
But that's the point that he was at. So my approach to people coming out is you've got to be as careful with your own mental health as the people that you're telling. Because they're getting this news instantaneously and they may not have any clue it's coming. Whereas you, as the queer person, has likely had years to mull over it, think about it, process it, begin to accept it and turn shame to pride.
Yeah.
It's a gentle, lovely, organic process. It's quick for them.
I'm going to drill down a little bit more into this because I do know a few people who are either in non-monogamous relationships or have tried non-monogamous relationships. And it seems to me that in the people that I've met, it has not ended well. And it seems to me that there's always one person who's not as happy as they pretend they are, that they're saying, yeah, no, this is great. Yeah, this is what we do and it's fine. So I'm interested in what you just said a second ago, Ruby, which is, it's a little bit tender when I sense that somebody might actually be falling in love with somebody else. So there is a clear difference, isn't there, between sex and then falling in love when the emotion comes in. Is that where it becomes difficult?
I mean, I think there's challenges with all of it. And I think you can't really have sex without care and intimacy and like a form of love. From what you're describing, it sounds like the people in your life might have already been in an established monogamous relationship and then changed things. That's not impossible, but it's tricky because you've already got all the context of what that monogamous relationship looks like and you're kind of having to actively undo that. And I know lots of people who have done that and it's worked. I also know people who've given that a go and it hasn't done, and that's okay as well. I don't think it means that non-monogamy as a whole is a failure, but it's just actually that wasn't the right thing for those individuals or for one of them, if one of them actually just wasn't as into it. There's something different about establishing non-monogamous relationships. When I've met like a couple of my more longer-term partners, we met each other being like, hey, yeah, I'm doing this. This is the flavour of non-monogamy that I practice. What does yours look like? Oh, cool, they align. We're looking for similar things. Do we get on? Yes, let's have fun.
So what needs to be in place then for a non-monogamous relationship to work? Are you saying, Ruby, that it's about finding that other person who's also into that kind of fluidity? Is that the key to this?
Yeah, I think it can be. I think you've got to have a really strong sense of self and know what it is you're curious to explore. Doesn't mean you need to have all the answers. And it's finding people who are like-minded, definitely, and finding people where you can really establish a sense of trust. And that's easier said than done. But I think when you can find people where you know you're not always going to get it right, but there is the care and respect and trust as a foundation to that, then you've built a solid foundation for whatever can come after.
Tell us about at what point you recognised that actually I'm really quite unwell, and what treatment you sought and your own journey towards healing.
I think I realised that I was pretty unwell by the time I was 14. I was having to go as an outpatient to be weighed every week because my weight had plummeted so much.
And getting dressed in the morning to go to school was taking me 2 to 3 hours. And I won't go into the intricate details of my OCD, but suffice to say that I had to have these patterns of people that I would imagine every time I did something. So every time I put on a sock or a trouser leg or a jumper, I would have to do it until I had the exact right sequence of people in my head. And if one of those images was missing or was wrong, I had to do it all over again. So every task took hours. And I think it got to the point where life was becoming impossible to live, essentially. I mean, I went into treatment in my 20s. I got signed off work when I was a lawyer. Just about coped without being hospitalised. I kept breaking bones, which was a sign that my body just wasn't able to withstand the physical abuse that I was putting it under. I was on the wait list for an NHS unit, which is the only unit in the UK that does OCD inpatient treatment. And that then closed due to COVID. Oh, so that had been my lifeline since I stopped working as a lawyer, and I decided, right, I'm going to now really focus on my mental health. And in fact, it wasn't until I was lucky enough to go to the States at absolute crisis point. It just got to the point where I couldn't see the point of I was existing rather than living. And I had been for a number of years. And I was watching my friends settling down, getting married, starting to have children. And I just thought, what is this? Yeah, it wasn't then until I got to the States and I had very, very intensive exposure response prevention treatment where I literally did 7 hours a day, 7 days a week for 6 months.
Of therapy.
And doing all exposure after exposure after exposure. So in OCD, what you do is you expose someone to their fear gradually. So I was out and about constantly trying to rewire my brain and enforce that neuroplasticity and take advantage of that. But that was just a start, Anna. I came back after 6 months there. And of course, you have a baseline and you drop below that baseline, but you don't drop as far as I was at my rock bottom before I left. And since then, that was 3 years ago, I've been trying to slowly rebuild up to where I got in LA, and I'm slowly getting there, but every day is a real marathon. I try and describe it to listeners on the podcast as though it's like having a second brain that whirs away, and I have to keep that brain under control and I have to manage it. And it's not easy because it's exhausting, first of all, and everything I do is a trigger. So coming here today, I have an OCD trigger around new things. So everything new that I do, my OCD wants me to do X, Y, and Z compulsions. So to make it all right and to make the new chapter, the sort of right new chapter where good things are going to happen. So essentially it's like saying a prayer. But I know that to beat my OCD, I can't say any of those prayers. I can't imagine any of those people. I can't go and exercise, which again is part of the compulsive element. So it's trying to live life and to realize that life can be so much richer and more full. And I can meet some incredible people like you. And that's where my hope for recovery comes.
Do you know, just listening to you, and I hope I hope you take this the right way, which is there's so much pain. Mm. There's so much pain. It upsets me. Mm. Really, I'm actually really sorry. I'm sorry, Pandora. Mm. Yeah, no, it's just really upsetting, actually. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Do we want to take a little breather? Yeah, maybe 1 second. Sorry.
Not at all. Yeah.
So sorry. So I shall pull myself back together and carry on with the podcast. I just found that so touching and so upsetting. And, you know, just for me to sit opposite Pandora and to see somebody who's a survivor and who's doing so well and inspiring and helping other people who may be suffering.
Got pregnant in March 2020. And
so actually that's right at the beginning of the pandemic, mm-hmm. March 2020. Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then December 2020, I felt ill. I remember being downstairs in our living room, eating an ice lolly at like 5 a.m. And I was like, I think I've got COVID. Went to like a drive-through test centre, did a test. Next day, they took my vitals and was like, something's going on. And then they wrote down a piece of paper and said, you need to go to hospital, like now. So I'm obviously crying my eyes out on the way to hospital. Already had my bag packed because obviously I'm like a Virgo and everything's prepared. Hospital bag packed for me and baby.
How pregnant were you?
33 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah.
So on the brink of having your baby.
Yeah.
Right. So you're admitted and you're in there for 5 days.
Yeah. And in that 5 days, My test results come back. I get a text on my phone. I've got COVID. I'm on oxygen. I'm in and out of like life. I'm alive. I'm breathing, but like I'm not all there. And I tell them, take my baby out. He has to come out. That's it. Take him out. And they weren't going to take him out. I said, I just know in my gut, he's going to be fine. Just take him out. So went down for a C-section. Cyprus came out. They put his head to mine. And I remember it was so small and warm. And they said he's going to go to the NICU. And then I hear my partner crying. Lee, my partner, he doesn't cry. He's crying in the toilet on the phone to his mum saying she's really unwell. They've mentioned the ICU. I remember saying bye to Lee at the doors closing. He then goes home. I'm in the ICU. And that's all I remember. I text my doula at the time. I said, I think I'm going to die. But I don't remember saying that. So I said, I think I'm going to die. I think something's seriously wrong with me. And then I gave a signature to be put into a coma because my lungs were working too hard and I needed to rest, obviously, to get better. And then that's it. And then I'm down in that coma for 3 months. So during that time, they tried to bring me around. Apparently, I woke up and went absolutely mental, pulled my tubes out, was like punching nurses. Apparently, that's a very normal reaction. And then they realised that I couldn't handle it. My oxygen levels went, so I had to go back under. And then they brought me round the second time and I was awake. I FaceTimed my family. I'm talking to them. And then my vitals went again, so I had to get put back under.
For a third time?
Yeah. And then the third time I got brought round, I went into cardiac arrest. So I had 10 members of staff bringing me back around. I was dead for 5 minutes. The biggest thing that shocks people is that I believe I saw an archangel. I saw a massive, massive, massive green figure, and he was so big. He was black, he had dreadlocks, and he said, you can't die. No matter how many times you die, I'm not letting you die. And he said, I'm going to fill you with my green light. And then I came back.
That is absolutely extraordinary.
There was like a nursery type rhyme playing. There was really peaceful music. And when I was awake in the ICU and like talking and healthy-ish, I heard the music and I was like, what is that? I heard that in my coma. And a lot of my nurses were Asian, like Filipino or Malaysian. And they said, oh, that's Chinese bamboo flute music. I played it to you in your coma. And I was like, I heard that.
You heard it?
Yeah. Mm.
God, I mean, it's so extraordinary.
My mental health was absolutely horrendous after I woke up. I had the psych team with me a lot. And I said, in order for me to get better, I need to see my loved ones because this isn't normal. To be half dead and not be around people that make you feel safe, I can't function. Lee was allowed in. He was allowed in 3 times a week. It was like all my dreams had come true. Like when he came in, I just instantly felt like, okay, I'm going to be okay because the ICU is so depressing. You can't see any plants. The windows are frosted. So I didn't see the sky for 5 months, the sky. And yeah, it's just awful. So seeing him made me feel better. And then in the March, I think it was just after Mother's Day, I saw Cyprus for the first time. And we had to go to a special room because obviously COVID was still a thing and we needed to make sure that we were both safe. So I was washed head to toe, saw him for an hour, bittersweet because I was like, this is my child who's now going to be taken away from me again. Like I was absolutely raging. And that was a Sunday. The Monday, I was so depressed. I couldn't speak. I refused to see Lee. I was going through it. And then on the Thursday, I could breathe again. I think seeing Cyprus gave me, I was like, I need to get home for him.
So you knew that you could breathe.
Yeah.
Cyprus gave you that message, if you like, that I'm alive and I want to breathe and live for my child.
Yes.
That's absolutely extraordinary. They were your lifeblood of, I've got to be with these people.
In my coma dreams, my whole dream was about getting back to my baby and Lee, which is what was happening in real life.
Yeah. So they were your life force, your reason for being alive.
Yeah.
If you missed any of those or you just fancy another listen, you can check out the episodes in full wherever you're listening to this. And if you've already binged them and you need more, Well, fear not, because we'll be back next week with a brand new episode of It Can't Just Be Me.